This is B2B Tech Talk, a podcast with Ingram Micro and Moxie Insights. I'm James Henderson, Editorial Director at Moxie Insights. In this episode, I'm joined by Lachlan White, advising Australian organisations on how to accelerate AI deployment both strategically and pragmatically.
Yeah, there's always a scale of maturity when it comes to any new technology. We're now starting to see more focused use cases and therefore focused outcomes, which is great. One of the analogies I really like to use when it comes to data and now, adding and extending into AI is, we've for a long time been told that, that the data is the new oil that's in the ground. And if you want to get that oil out of the ground and do something with it, you can't just dig a hole with a spade and then turn it into petrol for the car or any other type of fuel. You need to build that refinery. Lucky to have a couple of mentors through my career, and one of the CIOs I worked with told me very early on that there's only two types of projects when it comes to delivery. There's business successes and there's technology failures.
On AI, Lachlan removes the barriers of poor data quality, subpar user education, and also a lack of business ROI. This is an in-depth analysis on an in-demand technology. Enjoy this episode. Lockie, I'll start with maybe an obvious one, but really want to get your sentiment on this. Yes, we're going to talk about AI today, but has that narrative become a little bit boring and predictable in the market? Are you sick of talking about it?
I think it's definitely a repetitive sentiment at the moment. I feel like every conversation is similar to when cloud started and migrations were happening. Every conversation will gravitate towards it. I think it's still an interesting conversation to have. I think it's interesting to see the disparate nature of where the conversations are starting from the customer's perspective. Yeah. A lot of people are like, I want that use case, or I want to get this benefit or this return on investment. Or a lot of the conversations are actually about the technology. There's very few conversations starting from the point of view of, I would like to solve this problem. Is it possible? There's a lot of predetermined conversations that seem to be happening, which whilst it's great, from a consulting company business to come and say, great, let's get stuck into it. We find that we're doing a lot of education on the subject as we're going, which then seems like we're trying to slow things down. So I feel like it's a little bit boring in terms of the conversation because it feels like we're repeating ourselves quite a lot. But I feel like clients, by the time they've finished that conversation, are feeling like they've got a lot more confidence what they're actually trying to solve with the technology, as opposed to just jumping on the hype train.
And Lockie, I think that's it, right? You hit the nail on the head. And that education is incredibly important. But just on that initial, curve of technology adoption, you mentioned cloud, it's AI today, it could be something else tomorrow. Is this the phase you have to go through where there's almost too much hype? It becomes too high level, too predictable, too boring. In this initial, everyone talks about it, but we want to get to the bit where everyone's doing something about it.
Yeah, there's always a scale of maturity when it comes to any new technology, right? Just as all the technologies start massive, as we can see with large language models. I mean, they've given us the hint, the size is in the name. And then we've now got smaller language models starting to come out as well. We're now starting to see more focused use cases and therefore focused outcomes, which is great. And I think it was very similar when it came to cloud migration, and the start of the hyperscalers in that space as well. It was originally just get everything to the cloud as fast as possible to maximize the most amount of money that you can save, run like the most amount of potential in your engineering. And I think now where we're at, it's much more selective and case by case. And on top of that, it's multidimensional in that selection. So you've got, why would we move this to a Kubernetes cluster instead of on virtual machines as a level, as opposed to the whole fleet can go to one solution, or modernize everything, or don't touch anything. It's much more nuanced. And I think when it comes to AI, I think that everyone jumps on the hype, gets excited about, generative AI and what it can do. But sometimes we're square peg, round hole a little bit when it comes to generative AI. And it's, as an example, it's not great at making decisions. But a lot of the use cases are like, well, how do I get it to do my job for me? And it's not really the purpose of it. But there are other solutions within the AI ecosystem that can help with that type of use case. But the second you don't say the generative AI buzzword, you're kind of already on the back step to a lot of different conversations. So there is too much hype because it sometimes means that the focused, content that we would want people to start consuming is just drowned by the absolute amount of noise that comes from all of the hype material around it.
And just on that, Lockie, if we get into the actual conversations you're having, and you mentioned the education part, which we can go into a little bit more in the use cases and really getting specific and targeted. But just in terms of adoption, appetite's there, enthusiasm there, you've referenced that. The conversations you're having at the minute in the Australian market, are they at that stage still of, as you mentioned, we're talking about it, but we're not quite doing it? Or are they looking to someone like yourself, a services partner, consultant partner, whatever, to actually say, well, this is where you need to be at this stage. This is what you need to focus on. Where is it even possible to put a marker down in terms of where the market's at?
Yeah, and I think Microsoft have done a good job trying to survey
Mm.
companies and see where they're at
Yeah.
from a percentage wise as well. So Microsoft have got 5 levels of maturity when it comes to AI adoption. And I think we're definitely seeing a lot of people in the experimentation and planning phases still. I'd say that's probably 40 to 50% of the total market still. I think probably only 5% or so are in the true realization stage of multiple use cases, really returning an investment on the
Yeah.
spend. But I think that really comes down to the fact that a lot of people are, and a lot of companies are really taking it on themselves to learn all of how this works from the ground up. And in a lot of cases, they haven't got necessarily, these companies a very strong data footprint already to date. And so that means they're really starting off on an absolute ground zero. Whereas if they had a strong data science capability, potentially machine learning capability, they would already have a very clear view on what they were missing in terms of how they could unlock business value for their customers. And I think that's really where we're seeing a bit of a disparate gap between the realization of value in some of the bigger companies who have gone at it really hard, but also have that data quality and foundational capability, towards some of the other companies that are just getting started on that journey themselves on the data and AI space. In terms of what that looks like. And so I feel like instead of reaching out for support on people that are doing this kind of every day, a lot of people are trying to bring all of that internally, which is a great move if you're trying to really separate your market offerings to your
Mm.
client base through some unique and differentiated IP. But if you're just doing it to get efficiencies within your business, that could be quite a costly way to kind of realize those benefits as well.
And just on that experimentation phase, and as you mentioned, people are kind of messing around and then playing with the technology, which is certainly a good positive step forward in any technology that we speak about. But to your point there on data, Lockie, is that exposing kind of that they're not quite where they need to be, whether it's a data quality standpoint, whether it's their infrastructure, whether it's their environments or platforms? Is this experimentation phase actually exposing a lot of gaps in their business tech stack wise that maybe they didn't even know they had?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. I think there's two elements to that. One, you don't need necessarily perfect data to solve some of the generative AI use cases. And I think some people often think that, oh, well, I want it all perfect before I start. And whilst good quality data is never a bad thing, it's better to have some experimentation going on the benefit before you have to then look at, okay, well, they've said I can't do that until I've totally transform my entire digital and data estate. Well, that's going to cost me millions of dollars to get a smaller benefit. So you can't,
Yeah.
it's not absolute, I would say. One of the analogies I really like to use when it comes to data and now, adding and extending into AI is, we've for a long time been told that, the data is the new oil that's in the ground. And if you want to get that oil out of the ground and do something with it, you can't just dig a hole with a spade and then turn it into petrol for the car or any other type of fuel. You need to build that refinery. And that refinery then, depending on what you're looking to get out of it, will do things specifically different, whether it's 91, 93, 95, or you just want crude oil out the other side. There's different levels of maturity when it comes to that. And sometimes to prove certain use cases, a low level of data quality, but just having the data can be enough, especially if you're not looking for specific decisions out the other side. Whereas in other cases, if you're looking to replace, say, human activity and want a real genuine decision or full solution out the other side, obviously the data quality is therefore paramount. And so what we're looking at with a lot of our clients is the first use case. Let's prove that the concepts of what we're looking at solves, and then
Yeah.
we'll show you where the limitation of your data takes you to, where in some cases prompt engineering can kind of solve and mask some of that quality issues because of the expertise that the model holds as well. So it's a bit of a 50-50. It's not quite clear in terms of on the outset whether a use case is going to benefit from a high level of data quality. But I think the key thing is you don't need to wait to have perfect data to get started, because if you start and see value, then you then even got a more targeted
Yeah.
avenue to solve where the quality is bad in a specific area for that outcome, as opposed to the whole estate that you've got from a data perspective, because that's obviously quite a wide shot.
And as you mentioned, that nirvana of perfect data, you could ask any organization whether they truly would have that or ever have that continuous evolution of making sure their data is right. You'll be doing that forever. So you kind of don't want to be waiting too long, to your point. Just I'll keep on that analogy of drilling for oil and the data side, because it's bang on the money in terms of where the market is, the value. Do organizations always know what they're drilling for in terms of for the data that they're getting out? Do they know, to your reference, if it's crude oil, if it's X, Y, and Z? Because to get that point of, okay, the data is important, we know that. We need to drill it, mine it, whatever, however you want to play that. Do they know what to do with it?
I think in most cases they do. They
Mm.
definitely know what they want out the other side.
Right.
They definitely know they want this number or that number to help with this decision. I think
Mm.
the challenge is when you do that on scale, the communication of that becomes quite difficult. We've seen a lot of change across data techniques with data mesh being introduced by ThoughtWorks, a year or two ago. We've done a number of those types of projects to help people kind of decentralize the data. It's previously quite siloed and held by a single team that would then kind of control the narrative of data. I think now that we're decentralizing that story, it can enable a lot more people in a single point of time, but therefore the communication on what it is, how the quality is, the input and output of those two things now needs to be even more understood. And I think we're seeing a little bit of the maturity of that potentially lagging behind on that newer technique, as opposed to the traditional SQL data warehouse. I only push perfect things out the other side to be consumed, as an example. You would always know what you were going to get out the other side and build processes off that. Now I think there's a bit more openness to the experimentation that comes with data. And that comes from a better understanding of data security, understanding what it means to have that data, but also just the openness and access to that data as well.
You referenced, education at the top and obviously data, Lockie. When you've had these conversations, and I'm sure if we check back in 6 months or 12 months, there'll be a lot more intel and insights that you'll get. But when you're dealing with customers, what have been some of the common problems, roadblocks that you've seen that maybe have surprised you? I mean, everyone says the lack of strategy, definition, the data. So fair enough. I mean, they are huge problems that organizations want to tackle. But is there anything that's popped out that you've thought, actually, that was a little left of center? I didn't see that coming.
I think the most common one, which probably nothing too surprising. I think a lot of companies are in the same place.
Yeah.
Data quality is not there. Data engineering, they're not understanding what that is. They've been waiting to do that, but now with the AI benefits being dangled in front of them, they've got to kind of try to skip that step, which can be
Yeah.
in some cases quite dangerous if you're driving straight to a Formula One track, but you've never got a license before. That's a daunting journey for anyone. But I think the biggest issue that we see, and again, it's not as surprising, but it's just the loss of the actual genuine outcome for the business that's being sought through this technology. I
Yeah.
think a lot of technologists are excited by this technology and jumping straight into, oh, this model, that model, I could do this, or potentially this is something we can do, rather than going to the business and saying, what are the biggest problems you have? And taking that more human-centered design approach, which is kind of how we look to do it really from our perspective at Lab 3, is kind of work through what is your entire backlog of use cases? What are the things that we're best suited with to help you? Just because it says AI on it doesn't mean that we'll be the best company to help you solve that problem as well. So we kind of take a very honest, transparent approach and say, we've worked through this use case, we've taken a human-centered design, it's these end customers, these internal stakeholders, how is this going to work? Now let's have a conversation about what technology we want to use to solve that problem, which models to use, how they want to interface. Is it speech? Is it text? Is it a specific UI that we're looking at building for you, etc.? A lot of people aren't having that level of conversation and that level of detail. They're getting kind of drawn into the hype, as our previous points around, oh, I just need one of those. Let's grab that, run that, and then hopefully that works. And then kind of surprised when it doesn't.
And look, you're in a very good position here because you've been on the other side of the fence. You've been a customer. You've been, consuming, experimenting, purchasing technology in your previous roles at AGL, at GE, Toyota, Latitude. So, if I was to speak to you in that capacity, how would you be approaching this today?
So the way that I look at that's pretty boring, to be honest with you, James. I take the architectural view. It really comes down to functional requirements and non-functional requirements, a kind of fancy pros and cons list, really, and where the benefit to the business is going to be. I think really about how, if we went and built some use case, is that actually going to help my business sell more insurance? Is it going to help me sell more solar panels? Is it going to help me sell more electricity or telecom, etc.? And without a specific line between the technology to the outcome for the business, it's quite hard to do that. In our economy at the moment, it's really important that we're looking at maximizing the benefit that we're giving end users of the companies that we work for, as opposed to trying to build up the CV with the newest, latest and greatest piece of technology and then focus about the next job. So I'm a little bit boring on that. For me, it's all about what's the architectural pros and cons, business outcome, and kind of making sure that's really clearly defined. Typically, as I was mentioning, through that human-centered design approach, so that we're really thinking of the end client up front, as opposed to what code can I write and what systems can we build.
And Lockie, actually, again, that's it, right? And from the top, we're talking about that hype and really trying to get past that and cut through into the depth and the quality of AI in terms of how it can be put to work in an organization. And to your point, you're speaking there as also a technologist, right, in your CTO role. So the love of technology and experimenting is always going to be there, but having that discipline and pragmatism to actually make sure it's deployed effectively for the organization is the balance.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's a great segue into what Lab3 are doing. And you referenced it just slightly before. How are you building your capabilities, your guidance, your consulting to be mindful of all of that context that you've just shared there, whether it's their problems, whether it's their priorities, whatever that may be? How are you showing up?
Yeah, so I think we've taken a bit of an interesting approach to this. Firstly, we were very fortunate with Microsoft when they announced the AI Cloud Partner Program to be the only ANZ company on the board when Satya announced it. So we were first seat at the table, right, which was exceptional for us to be there, and we've loved being a part of those capabilities, and announced a joint center of excellence with Microsoft. So we've got a lot of buy-in from them at being a Microsoft partner, which has helped us kind of plan our roadmap really effectively compared to other competitors in the market. What we're trying to do is really focus on kind of that envisioning type style of engagement. So, what's the art of the possible? What are the use cases? Let's work through that. Again, that human-centered design focus on what we're looking to do. And then, in classical Lab3 way, we look to really bring some proven accelerators to clients to accelerate that outcome. So the problem we're seeing in a lot of cases is that for every dollar that's being invested for AI, they're seeing a $3.50 return, which is fantastic in terms of benefit. It's just taking 14 months for that to occur, which was based on the latest Microsoft survey of all of the Copilot adoption. And so where they're going, well, that's great, a great return, but how do we close that 14 months down to 8 months, 6 months, and then 3 months? And so from our point of view, and what we look to do across the board everywhere at Lab3, is how do we bring our expertise, but not in the form of only in people, but also in terms of prepackaged code and outcomes that work with those clients to accelerate that. And so we've got a specifically designed AI landing zone that we deploy that's all API driven, and then some also prepackaged use case formats depending on the industry vertical to look at solving those, so that there's 60-75% of the work done on the overall solution, and then we're fine-tuning what that success looks like for your business for each of those use cases, as opposed to going, great, we're starting our conversation today, what do you want to do? Okay, let's go figure out what that looks like. So it's a much different way of working that we like to bring to the table. And I think that really comes, personally from, I had a really lucky to have a couple of mentors through my career. And one of the CIOs I worked with told me very early on that there's only two types of projects when it comes to delivery. There's business successes and there's technology failures. That's it. So the business will claim success if everything's great, which they're entitled to do. It's their project. But when something fails, they're always kind of looking for, well, where did this go wrong? And a lot of the time, technology's got a hand in that too. So how do you get in front of that? Well, by joining hand in hand with the business the entire time is a great mitigation technique for that.
That's a very true way of putting it, actually, Lockie, in terms of when we speak to CIOs, when we speak to partner organizations or vendors, that's kind of exactly how it's defined, right? There's a winner in the business or there's a loser in tech. And does that to bring that back to Lab 3, is that where your role is in the middle, helping
Yeah.
connect that? And you mentioned that ROI of the $3.50 and bringing that down. Just the tech's great. You've got the expertise, clearly with the Microsoft side, of course, but you're needing to attach that to some business value. Is that where is the sweet spot?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing in market anywhere from 30 to 45% of the first few AI use cases the businesses undertake not progressing past kind of experimentation.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, any way where you can help a technology team or a business not fall into those traps by saying, actually, that use case isn't a great use of the technology for that. Actually, you're better off looking over here, or actually, we've done 5 clients in your industry and they're all doing these things. Just starting to have that balance of conversation. We're finding that it's really unlocking the kind of art of the possible thinking that some of these clients potentially weren't aware of before. And so, yeah, we really do play the middle line there, kind of representing the technology vision up to the business stakeholders and C-suite, whether that's board members, CFOs, understanding the return on investment, spending that time with the business, because again, these businesses aren't making money because they've chosen AI. It's because they're doing something different, accelerating some existing process or making a cost saving. And so losing sight of that from a technology point of view is always a dangerous position.
And just, I want to get in a little bit more on the ecosystem, especially you mentioned obviously your partnership with Microsoft. But before I do, final one on just those solutions. Lockie, you mentioned there as an example, you might have 5 clients in, I don't know, financial services or healthcare or whatever it may be, already building out AI solutions. Is that the path towards, as a Lab 3, creating scalable AI solutions? Because I know we talk about targeted use cases in each organization, but from your end, from an ecosystem standpoint, how you get this to a point where it's scalable and
Yep.
repeatable for the benefit of more customers across the organization. Is that the next phase of this? And maybe we're not quite there yet. I'm not sure, but is that where the
Yeah.
direction is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the challenges that we've seen, and now that we've been doing this for 2 years, it seems like it's still new, but we've been doing this for two
Yeah, that's
years in this
true, right?
specific tool set. But, AI and machine learning from a Lab 3 perspective, we've been doing for 6 years. So what we've seen is that scaling a lot of these systems and AI at scale is a real challenge for a lot of companies, just like it was for data originally, just like it was for cloud originally as well. And so what the landing zone that I spoke about before really focuses on enabling is a real governance security structure around the use of the technology on Azure to enable that to then scale. So essentially building something that enables a one to many, deployment method as opposed to a one-to-one. So for every use case, there's a whole bundle, and then you've got to kind of reinvest in that bundle every single time. It makes use cases really expensive to build. Whereas if you've got a backlog of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 1,000 use cases that you want to do, that investment up front to lay that foundational landing zone gives you a return on every single one of those use cases that you then pull forward, and also gives you some nice features. As an example, let's say in January, let's say that OpenAI come out with GPT-5, this new model that they're working on, and it's leagues ahead of GPT-4. Swapping that out, you want that to be quite simple and seamless. You don't want to have to redeploy everything and change everything again. But in a lot of cases, what we're seeing, and we're even following now into companies that have already attempted this themselves, we're seeing that there's a lot of kind of, as you would see in any technology spec, not best practices followed. And so those are all hard coded. They're not portable, and the logic's stuck within it. And so what we're seeing a lot of is our work in that AI at scale space is kind of unique. There's not a lot of places or partners that are doing that at the moment. It's like, imagine you go and you build an amazing Power BI dashboard for your board.
Yeah.
In my mind, and going back to that architecture view, the next question after you show them how good it is and show all the value is, oh, great, I now want one for this. Oh, well, that's going to cost the same as what the first one did. Their next question is going to be, but how? We've already done it once. And so you want to avoid that question altogether and keep getting the return on investment and scale through having something that's repeatable.
And Lockie, how do you leverage your ecosystem partnerships? Obviously, you mentioned Microsoft,
Yep.
and it's no easy feat to be recognized as an AI partner, given the specialization, the qualities and the skills you have to get. They're not handed out easily from Microsoft, of course. So that's a huge plus from a Lab3 standpoint, but also the wider ecosystem, where that's the Ingram Micro, the distribution side. How is all of that piecing together behind you guys to
Yeah.
actually help you deliver these capabilities?
Well, as you can imagine, it's a lot of new tech and a lot of new cost for everyone and a
Yeah.
lot of all these companies. And so, what's important for us, and we don't partner with a lot of companies. So the ones we do, it's quite strategic in how we look to partner. So obviously, as I said, I mentioned Microsoft, but Ingram Micro play a critical role within that as well. We really look to leverage Ingram Micro, especially when it comes to their licensing expertise. So, Copilot has a new licensing structure that comes with it on top of the standard M365 licensing. Being able to have a really strong understanding of how that can play into the overall investment when it comes to AI, and where the benefits and where maybe reducing costs in one bucket and enabling another is one example where Ingram Micro play a critical role when we're doing that with our clients, to be able to say, hey, did you know you've already paid for half of this over here? Or if you turn this knob down, you could actually reinvest it here, and your whole company's screaming to be able to turn that on already. And that's a quick win. So being able to leverage those kind of partnerships, and obviously Ingram Micro and Microsoft have a strong partnership together as well, means that, getting that kind of trifecta and going and solving and then painting the picture of the holistic business problem, as well as then providing the platform, the costings, the licensing, and the engineering, is a really unique way in which we can go and have that holistic conversation with clients.
And Lucky, final one on AI in terms of the Australian market. If you're a business watching or listening to this and thinking, completely agree that we've been experimenting, but we just need to fix the data. We're getting educated. We're moving into deployments that are very business outcomes and crunching that ROI down exactly as you've explained. What advice would you give, just as a final takeaway, for some of those businesses still on that journey? And as I mentioned, this isn't going to stop anytime soon. Is there anything you can say at this stage as a word of advice or guidance?
I'm going to sound like a bit like a broken record on this one, James. But for me, it comes back to solving the business problem. So just like Kubernetes 6-7 years ago when it came out, and AI now, what is the solution that we're actually looking to build with this, and how are we maximizing the benefit that this technology can provide to me to solve that outcome? Because if you do one project where that doesn't happen, that technology is now dead for that organization. So being on the front foot, understanding your business stakeholder outcomes and requirements is essential to ensuring that you're going to get the longevity of the technology investment that you're making, but also then provide the space to do some of the more edge and exciting use cases that get unlocked by using AI. And I think that's the only advice I've really got for front of mind for businesses themselves at the moment, is make sure you're tying the technology to the business problem rather than just taking something off the shelf from a vendor and hoping that the outcome's what you want.
Solid advice, Lockie, and rooted in your experience and expertise of, as I said, being on the other side of the fence, but also living and breathing it today with helping your own customers. So really appreciate you taking us through the AI landscape, the highs, the lows, where we're at the minute in Australia. And I'm sure this will change I don't know if it's by the day, if it's by the month, but it's very fast paced, as we know. Final point, Lockie, is more on you. So more on you as an individual. And we ask this to all of our guests. So closing comment, closing question. As a leader and as a human, how do you want to be viewed?
That's a tough question. Well, let's go. Let's go interesting. I think the key with the rise of AI is to ensure that people in general, myself and others, are viewed as that, as people and the qualities of people in opposed to machines. So, the empathy side of things becomes extremely valuable, I find. The ability to mentor others, show growth rather than a flat response, whilst it can be tempting to say, oh, why don't you just Google that? Why don't you just put that into Copilot? Why don't you just go solve that problem yourself? You've got all the tools. I think it's even more important in the day and age now, where we have some of those tools available, to take the human element very seriously, because in some of these formats, you don't want to look back in 5 years and say, man, wasn't that nice? I wish I'd done that instead. And so I think that's what really comes for me, is keep the human element. So what would I like to be viewed as a human? As a human.
Brilliant way to close that out, Lockie. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, James.
If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave a review. And to watch more episodes, check out the website. Thank you for tuning in to B2B Tech Talk.